It's like a rallying cry. It's like a mantra. It's like a religion. Every time that Square Enix posts another L, the fanboys come crawling out of the woodwork while Final Fantasy XIV will keep them afloat every single time. Never mind that the newest expansion, Dawn Trail, was a complete and utter failure. The mindset is the same that uh, Blizzard fanboys had back when WoW came out. Like, well, yeah, sure, Blizzard stopped making new Warcraft games. Yeah, the StarCraft game that came out wasn't as good. Diablo got worse. They stopped producing new games in general, but it's okay because World of Warcraft is going to keep them afloat. Absolutely no regard at all for the creativity of the company, no regard at all for the no they place no value in the creation of new IPs or niche products. No, because WoW is the greatest thing in gaming, the only viable MMORPG that somehow makes everything Blizzard does completely okay and completely justifies Diablo 3 and everything that happened after. Okay? Like every single character in Overwatch is gay except Tracer. And that's perfectly okay for to Blizzard fanboys because WoW is going to keep them afloat. Now, WoW has been like on the decline for a long time, and Blizzard along with it. Now, people aren't like publicly admitting this. They're not acknowledging that Overwatch is a bomb, that Diablo 4 failed, that they have absolutely nothing in the pipeline that can uh, come out to keep people satiated, right? Blizzard is clearly a declining company, but it took a very, very, very long time for its hardcore obsessive fanboys to admit it, right? And now we're kind of in this process where WoW is falling off and people have to accept that, like, wow, Overwatch wasn't very good. I should have played Splatoon growing up. Like, people are beginning to accept that reality for World of Warcraft and Blizzard. And the same thing is going to happen to Final Fantasy XIV, right? This is the same exact situation in which Square has completely squandered all their goodwill with fans. They've run aground with their ridiculous decisions to move away from turn-based combat, to milk Final Fantasy dry, to stop producing new and interesting IPs, to take way too long in development, to cater to woke culture. They're doing everything that Blizzard did wrong. But the cope remains the same. Well, at least they have Final Fantasy XIV. Again, I cannot wait until Nintendo unveils their MMO and starts stomping this stuff into the dirt because I am so tired of seeing people cope about like Final Fantasy XIV just because it's one of the only MMORPGs on the market, right? Because it's the only game in town, it's the only one that anybody plays or talks about, or used to at least. And hopefully, with the recent expansion and like what an epic failure that was, and like the goings on at Square Enix, which are far worse than what Final Fantasy XIV can salvage, I do think the end is near, right? We are at the point where Square is going to suffer severe consequences for what they've been doing. And I think this has been going on behind the scenes for a long time with, when the talent is coming out, like speaking out against like the type A and type B shit, when you have people like spurging out about certain things in the company, like you start to see more and more that they are a failing, declining brand, and there just isn't going to be a return to form anymore. These people are going under, and there's just nothing that anyone can do about it. The reality is, when you look at everything that's been happening now in recent years, that Square Enix is no longer seen as the premier JRPG developer. That title is going either to Atlus or Nintendo. Nintendo if you're not a fucking pleb, but Atlus if you're a filthy casual who only cares about waifus. But like, if you're a weeb who only likes Persona for sexualizing underage girls. Like, again, the correct answer is Nintendo, but most people right now are saying Atlas. So Square Enix is no longer the developer for the JRPG genres. And it's entirely based on their own misdeeds, right? It's entirely based on their own actions, right? They stopped producing JRPGs, so of course they gave up their only real claim to fame. The company that publishes Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. Square deserves everything bad that happens to them. Like, I cannot emphasize this enough as we go into like the Square Enix spiraling the drain saga, because this is a company that deserves everything that's bad that's happened to them. They've screwed over their talent. They screwed over Nintendo. Hiroshi Yamauchi felt the need to speak out against them at several points towards the end of his career. Square is a company that had every right to be the absolute best in the industry. If they were on top of their game in the mid 2000s, they easily would have stomped like shit like Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect and The Witcher 3 or whatever the fuck like people were pretending to play in the West. Like, Square at their peak were producing games better than that like every couple of months. Chrono Trigger, there are just dozens and dozens of examples of it. Like, Dragon Quest VII is still one of the longest RPGs ever made, and especially so when you realize like it's a linear game that you have to go through as opposed to like Skyrim's open-ended nature. Square produced a longer linear JRPG than Bethesda managed to accomplish with like a Western RPG. Like a genre that's tailor made for like endlessly replaying. Like, it's shocking when you really like start realizing that, like, just how much higher quality Dragon Quest VII Fragments of the Forgotten Past is compared to Bethesda's pleb Skyrim. Like, the quality difference between like Square at their peak versus today is just awful. And you can see this in like the lower budget titles. Like, just look at like the games I've been playing recently, stuff like ActRaiser Renaissance and a couple of other things. Like, a lot of their lower budget games are just becoming embarrassingly bad to the point where I honestly don't even know like how they got produced. There are like these really weird like issues, even in like really good games like Triangle Strategy, where where they have this story segment where they say that someone's gonna come help you, and then it doesn't happen, and then you see them just not doing anything like in the next story segment, and you're just like, what? How did this happen? And I like Triangle Strategy, but that lack of quality control was concerning even back then when it first came out. And seeing the disaster of games like Octopath Traveler 2, it feels like things there are getting even worse, especially with like some of the controversies that have sprung up around like Dragon Quest 3 and stuff like that. Final Fantasy 16 featured a gay kiss. That in and of itself is enough for me to boycott the entire company, regardless of everything else I've talked about. Like, Square deserves to go under. And what's more, this is not a fringe opinion. This is not something I am not the only person saying this. Plenty of people want to see Square Enix fail, and as a result of that, people are eventually going to get sick of Final Fantasy 14 and stop paying for it. Once that happens, once the player base starts moving away to whatever else, Square Enix is not going to be able to keep the lights on.